Okay, this is OK here, and we are watching a round 2 match of the Crazyhouse Team League. Just to give a quick introduction first of the Crazyhouse Team League, you can see here the rosters. There are 7 boards, and they may be a little bit cut off, and 6 teams, and we're now in round 2. So we see here ZH Horror has already won their round 2 match, with a couple of matches still to go. And Yekin's Love Gun is playing against Team 4, which has yet to choose its name. And that match is very tight, 5 games all, but 2 matches still to play. GSVC against Gene Simmons, which will be at 1400 GMT. And the match ongoing right now is Colwem against adande1. In fact, colwem on my team. And then finally there's a match of the Legionnaires against Cirque du Soleil, with also a couple of matches still to play, and still up in the air because 7-7 would be a tie given their 7 boards. And just to explain, on every board you play 2 games. One is white and one is black. And this is a spin-off of the Lichess 45-45 League. But it has its own website, zh.lakin.ca/zhteam, which will be incorporated. This is a temporary website, will be incorporated in future in Lichess 45-45. And this is the ongoing match, and let us, and these are the standings. On my blog, zhchess.blogspot.com, you can see, you can read all about it. But let's turn to the match. It's quite a slow match because the way it works is on board 1 they play 5+5, on board 2 6+6, all the way down on board 7 they play board 6 rather. They're playing 10+10. Sorry, this is a board 6 match. Is that right? Yes, I think so. So just to run through where we're up to so far, 10+10 is quite a nice time control. In fact, in the first 3 seasons of the ZH League, it was an individual league and all the games were 10+10. So the idea of this league is there are many opportunities to play fast Crazyhouse, and this is an opportunity for slower Crazyhouse, which has value. So both sides are developing here very normally. White going quite aggressive with an attack, and but black neatly castling. So white could sack to open up the king, but he doesn't have quite enough pieces in hand. He'd only have a pawn and a rook to continue any attack. He would need knights or bishops, a knight ideally, to continue the attack. So white should develop here. So yeah, the knight is chased back, and a very nice move. Looking at this pin, so black has played very nicely here. He's both stopped black from pinning the knight to the queen, and he's also created his own pin. So the natural follow-up is exactly the move that he played. So this is very nicely played. So just going back a little. So in this position, yeah, so I would say in this position, d3 and developing the queen side is possibly slightly stronger than going straight for an attack. Because there are not enough pieces to follow it up, and in this sort of situation, white's lost a little bit of time having to go back again. So it's almost as if black is now playing white in this position. Also, just to say in this setup, so sometimes black takes the bishop out, eyeing the f2 square. Also, sometimes black develops like this, playing more passively, maybe even playing d6 and keeping his bishop behind the pawn chain. It is more passive, but the problem with playing like this is white should be aiming to get his bishop out to here and his knight to here. And if he does that quickly, black's best move is in fact to just give up the queen. So that's the more usual line that we probably saw, for example, in the Crazyhouse World Championship match between Jan Lee and Master Tan. It's quite often black does have to give up the queen for a piece, just to avoid being too passive in e4, e5 setups. But with here, it's almost as if black has taken the initiative and taken the white side. So knight takes knight, queen takes. This only helps put even more pressure on this pin. I mean, knight takes knight is coming with check. So this pressure is very great indeed. So if I'm looking ahead in this position, yeah, I'm slightly wary of looking ahead since this is a live match, and it just occurred to me that one or either of the players might I hadn't thought of it when I started streaming, but I should have set a delay or done this as a recording. So I'm just going to commentate on past moves, just because of that. But yeah, in the current situation, clearly black has got a lot of pressure on this f3 square. So in a way, yeah, every time a player exchanges, you have to think, who does that exchange benefit? So I'm guessing the reason that white took that knight is he thought that knight would be more useful to him than it is to black. Yeah, and this is what we see is him placing the knight here. He obviously thinks that he can use that piece taken first. And so in such situations as black, black would have a choice whether to defend or to counterattack. Now I'm just going to check that the title is up correctly. And everything is going smoothly, because for some reason I can't see. Crazyhouse Team League, colwem against adande. In fact, it's the only thing happening on Lichess at the moment. Okay, so interestingly, both players started with 10 minutes on the clock, but now they're both under 4 minutes, and they're almost just out of the opening. So they're both going to find themselves in time pressure very soon. Yeah, so all this I would say was opening, but really white should have played d3 and developed his queen side. That was the one, and taken his advantage as white. And then if he was to choose to go knight to g5 with an obvious threat, this is just castles. Yeah, then in this position, not converting on the threat, not taking anyway, that's fine. developing is a good idea, but going back makes him a little bit passive. Maybe he could have tried to the same idea of h3 stopping bishop g5. So maybe h3 was called for. Because by not playing h3, adande by not playing, so probably here, h6, yeah, I'd say this is probably the critical mistake so far from adande, was not taking on f7 here. Now it's true white would only have a pawn in hand, but let's calculate. Knight takes pawn, rook takes, bishop takes, king takes, a pawn and a rook in hand. Still, the black king would be quite exposed, and there'd be some possibility for developing quickly and starting an attack on the weak light squares. But what we've seen is this. Okay, and the move played. So Colwem had a choice between defense of the queen, for example, just bringing the queen back here, or counterattack, knight takes knight. But taking the knight comes with tempo, so I would say that he made a wise decision in taking the knight. Okay, now white has opted for a very interesting idea of taking with the queen. So now black is given a choice. Do I take with the bishop or do I take with the queen? And the problem is if he takes with the bishop, knight takes queen comes with check. So I think he does the right thing in taking with the queen. And in this position, black has two knights and a queen in hand, so he could go bishop takes pawn, which threatens mate in one, or as he does, he could go for the check first. And that is very interesting. Okay, the king comes up. Okay, now why didn't the king slot here? Because then bishop takes pawn comes with check, and he's winning another knight. Okay, so coming up is clearly to defend this pawn. So black is clearly on the attack here. So the question is, with knight and queen, can we finish this off? So he goes to bishop takes f3. What other moves might he have done in this position? Let's see if we can calculate. With a knight and a queen, with a knight and a queen, he would another idea would have been, bishop takes pawn might be very good. Another idea would have been knight here. If the king goes back, queen at g2 is checkmate. If the king goes up, queen here check forces king takes knight, and then pawn here check, and the king, notice the queen is here and the bishop is here, keeping the king fixed. So the only defense would be bishop takes pawn, and pawn takes pawn would be checkmate. So that would have been one way of doing things, but he's gone for bishop takes pawn, king takes pawn has happened, and knight h4. So king takes bishop is very sensible, because if you take the knight, there's just queen here check and queen here checkmate. So king takes bishop at least has an eye to running to safety. So now white has a pawn, a knight, and a queen in hand, and he goes for the knight check. And adande has had the choice to run this way, but then there's simply something like queen here. So if you'd run this way, just simply something like queen here check, king takes knight, and again the same idea, pawn here, bishop takes pawn, and pawn takes, the pawn would be defended by the knight, so the king here would be with the knight and queen would be checkmated by a pawn here, a knight here, and a queen here. So, okay, instead, of course, he runs this way, trying to find some safety on the queen side, but the bishop is cutting off an obvious escape route. Okay, so pawn here. The king is now trying to run out this way, and it's not obvious that it can't. So the king has actually managed to get away. Now, in this position, or has it? Yeah, so there's no... Okay, there's actually a bishop. Yes. So, going back to this initial position, was that takes, knight here. So knight here was clearly a mistake. Knight here would have stopped the king from running away so easily. So if the king had run here, queen here would be checkmate. So you have to cut off the king's run. Whereas running back here, we could still go queen here, check, king here, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. So a knight on this square allowed the king to run away from the knight, whereas a knight in the center of the board would have controlled, and even if it did run this way, you'll notice also it controls this square if you ever needed to go queen takes pawn. So what's happened instead is this, and he's gone for the rook. Now, now this is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous from black to go for the piece, because it could be that white in this position has a mate with a knight, a bishop, and a queen. And so before grabbing the material, you'd have to check to make sure that white doesn't have a mate. And actually the most concerning move is not knight at e7, but knight at f6. Because if you don't take the knight, queen at h7 is checkmate, and if you do take the knight, knight takes check, and again queen h7, so you have to run up. Then the knight swings back and guards off the escape square. You might swing up again, but then there's queen here check, king takes knight, queen there check, king takes knight, queen there check, king takes this knight, queen there check, checkmate. So rear side 8000, why not knight at f6? Yes, so I'm trying to keep myself a little bit behind the action so I don't interfere, just in case. The players, of course, are totally focused on their game, but just in case, that's why I'm not giving 100% live commentary. I'm just keeping a move or two behind. So knight at e7 was played, king to h8. King to h8 seems very sensible. There's not, because white's got bishops and queens in hand, there are no bishop and queen checks. And it's now white to play. Yes, so as I explained, that was a mismate from both sides now. And it should be mentioned, this is a round 2 match. In round 1, adande was mate in 4 against him for about 20 moves, but he kept running his king around the board and survived, then ended up mating his opponent. So he has history of this. So he's done the same today. The king on g1 has ended up relatively safe on g3. There are no obvious checks, and black's pieces are somewhat on the wrong side of the board for an attack on the king. But material-wise, black has picked up material now. So black does have a rook in hand, so black is a lot safer than he was. But in some sense, white has got a little bit initiative. Time pressure is a problem. Okay, things are going to get serious now. So just going back a move, what would have been options? So in order to get in on this black king, clearly attack on the dark squares is very powerful. And this is very interesting because there's a double attack, an attack on the queen and attack on g7. And colwem, as you see, has gone for the greedy option, which also puts his queen in the vicinity of the white king. He's kind of hoping that there is no mate against him. If you were worried that there would be mate against you, you'd have to if you took the bishop, there's a pawn drop takes, and then you're calculating, can this bishop kill you? And the answer is it could. So if you ever took the bishop, pawn drop takes, and bishop here, and there's no defense on these dark squares. So that was a mistake, dropping the queen so early, because that was just straight away mate by dropping a pawn or a bishop here, defended by the knight. And wherever the king goes, it's not so obvious, because this square is defended. But a bishop is more powerful, and the queen at the edge of the board. So let's see if we can calculate a mate here. So I was thinking bishop here, king here, maybe just pawn here, and then you even pick up a knight, and you just have too much material, and this is obviously a checkmate. Okay, but he went for queen first, and this gives the king a degree of safety, although queen takes knight comes with check. Okay, rook at h6, but now, so the problem is white's used up his queen, but, okay, he's got pieces in hand. Knight here check, comes here, knight here check. Okay, these knights are swarming in. Bishop here, and there's a mate with the bishop and the two knights. So it turns out bishop takes h6 was actually a very, very nice move, and pretty hard to defend. So that taking we saw was a bad idea, and I'd say probably let's open up this game in a new tab while they start the new one. Resai says pawn on f6. Yes, indeed. So this is something both these players can definitely learn from. So this is a very good move, because you're hitting both the queen and you're threatening bishop takes, king takes, and at f6 with a pawn or a bishop. Colin went for the greedy option, taking here. Then it takes, a queen is a mistake, because you want the queen on the edge of the board, controlling, to deliver the mate, as it were. The danger of putting the queen on too soon is the king runs to safety. Having said that, here, king here is basically the only move. Queen takes knight. There's not much. As a principle, you want to block. If you went here, then it's not. The queen is cutting off any escape route. You could just even go something like drop a knight here, for example. I think that's checkmate, because this knight covers off those two squares. So a second knight would cover off this square. So he had to block. And in this position, it's a very nice move, exploiting the pin, bringing in the knight. So now this knight covers off those two squares, this knight covers off those two squares. If you back off, queen takes rook, and queen takes here. So he went here, used a second knight, forcing you to back off, and then you don't even need queen takes rook, because you have this very pretty pawn and two knights mate. So it was mate, but as a general principle in this kind of position, bishop at f6 is much stronger. You might try and run, but the quickest way of mating here is simply queen here check, king here, and I don't know why my thing is lagging, and pawn here checkmate. So this would be a very nice way of finishing it off. You always have to watch out what squares are guarded by the opponent's pieces. So you can see these knights are actually guarding off these two squares. So we can't do, for example, queen here checkmate, which would be a more standard mate. But the thing is, bishop just pushes the king to the edge of the board, and the queen is wonderful at delivering mate. So this is very, this is really for 1500 level Crazyhouse to checkmate more efficiently. In this position, how would black have defended with just a rook? So these dark squares are really an issue. I think this is actually really difficult to defend. So he's losing his queen. So probably, maybe queen here, I would guess, would be the best move, because that way you save your queen and you protect b7. But let's turn on the engine and see if there's any defense for white when it got to this stage. Queen g2. Yeah. So queen g2 and so bishop takes h6, queen g2, and white is, sorry, not rook there. Queen g2 is what I said. Yeah, so queen g2 is reasonable. But yeah, bishop to f6, for example, for white, or there are other moves. Queen at h5 apparently is also strong. So bishop to f6 is defended by the knight, and the pressure on g7 is just too great. So in some sense, yeah, we saw black let white get away. And really, I'd say the critical move is putting the knight there. Probably played quite quickly. I mean, only played in, in 30 seconds or so. Knight here was really critical to stop the king from running away. And then once the king runs away, yeah, it's a really difficult position to play. White is winning. Before putting the king on, so apparently the best move for black here is simply king h8. Keep your queen in hand for a later opportunity, and black maintains some kind of advantage. And the point of that is because white had a much more efficient way of winning, as we saw, which was knight at f6, which is just mating straight away. Okay, so as I said, it's a two-game match. So let's turn to game 2, which we can begin to commentate on. So colwem has played d4, knight f6, and takes his bishop out. So it's a London system. d6, quite a passive setup, going d6. Knight f3, so he's stopping any e5 push. Very nice move. And black isn't even contesting that knight, so that might also be a natural idea. So it'd be very tempting for white to, but he is controlling the e4 square, so black is stopping any e4 push, and so e3 comes. So black is playing quite passively, but in a way, and so I obviously much prefer white's position here, but and e5 still not possible because there are 3 pieces guarding that square and only 2 defenders. This is a nice move. It hits the hanging bishop. Takes, and white has a really good control of the center. He can get his king safe. He's got a lead in development. He goes for e5 anyway. Well, he only has 2 pieces defending that square, and white's got 3 pieces. So takes a clear advantage by doing that. Okay, but because you've won that pawn, black does get a certain initiative in response. Knight at g4, hitting the hanging bishop in the center of the board, and so now white has a choice. Do you protect this bishop, or do we use all these pieces in hand? And the move that colwem did is a brilliant move, because it uses the bishop both to defend any potential sack on f2, and to defend his bishop, and to attack on c7. So this is the exclamation mark move of the game so far. The way you can combine defense and attack, and this is a sufficiently annoying attack. Well, pawn at d6 might be a defense, but then you're perhaps wasting a pawn. So it makes sense. What Adande's done makes a lot of sense to just trade off that. So he's trade off his attacking piece for white's attacking piece. And bishop d6. So with this move, black is trying to complete his development. So notice white's actually been delayed from castling by this. This e5 move did lose a pawn, but it's given black a little bit of activity and slightly delayed. So white is now a pawn up, but in exchange he's got a slight delay in development. And here the move colwem chose, you have a choice. Do I take? And you have to think, if I take, whose position do I improve? Do I improve my position or their position? And I quite like his decision to reinforce rather than to take. I think if he only had one pawn in hand, I'd be wary because I'd want that pawn fit somewhere else on the board. But yeah, this is a very good idea. To reinforce rather than to, because now, we're not quite on the live position, but we're close to it. Okay, so he castles. Now, in this position, white's finally got a breather. What about take and knight at f5? Yes. So takes, you're right, queen takes wouldn't have been possible because of knight at f5. And then queen would have to go back to f8, and then you could drop a pawn here, and yeah, white is all over. So you're right, actually. Bishop takes would have forced pawn takes. And knight at f5 is still actually a possibility with these sorts of ideas. Yeah, actually that is a very good point, and probably something like bishop at f8 might have been needed. So this is very solid, but actually, yeah, you're right. This bishop. So in fact, going back a move even further, I really feel bishop at d6 is a nice idea, but black should have probably used one of his pieces in hand. Now it does slow his development, but so I think challenging this bishop is a reasonable idea, but maybe with a new bishop. But then this would have happened. Bishop takes knight, queen takes, and maybe a knight drop here, hitting queen and bishop, or yeah, probably. So that would have been another way this game could have gone. Maybe this is too passive using a bishop in hand. So takes, queen. This bishop still needs to develop and so on. Another way of playing is just bishop here and deal with this, play more. But then, yeah, g7 does become a weakness. Okay, but what's happened in the game, I think, is a little bit more crazy. So far it's all very good, castles, but I just saw ahead. Bishop. Oh, okay, it's not so crazy. I thought white had played bishop at h6, and I was very confused. No, this is actually a very interesting move, bishop at h6. It's seeing that white does have ideas in future on h6 and g7, and it's trying to preempt those ideas. Now, unfortunately, yeah, I can say this because he's done it. This doesn't work because pawn at g5 is a fork. Now, this fork doesn't work immediately because of bishop takes pawn, pawn takes, and bishop takes bishop being annoying. But now it works. So, and this is in fact what's happened in the game. So bishop at h6 is a bit of a mistake. What should black have played in this position? It's quite difficult. So this reinforcement move I think is very impressive because if black ever takes, white's just pushing his pawns further forward into black's position. So this is actually quite a difficult. The threat is also bishop takes knight, queen takes pawn here. So this is actually quite a difficult position for black to play. So I'm not sure what is black's moves in this position. I mean, anyone in chat, we'll try and check in the engine afterwards. This is a kind of tricky positional question. What is black's best move in this position? If I just turn the board around a second. I'm afraid I'm... Okay, so let's see, what would I do in this position? So as I said, the threat is something like bishop takes knight, queen takes. So just we are going back a bit because I feel like bishop h6 was a mistake. We can't do something like knight g5 because we don't have a bishop protecting there. Yeah, it's really difficult. I'm tempted by bishop at g6, so that even if he gets in h6, we're defending against any any knights at f5 or knights at h5. I feel bishop at g6, but there is still bishop takes knight, queen takes, and pawn here, which is really annoying, frankly. So I'm not sure. If anyone can suggest in chat, drop a pawn on g6 maybe. Okay, so we'll see in the chat what is the best move in this position. It's a fun little puzzle. Because it's a positional puzzle. We're used to mating puzzles, but we're not used to positional puzzles. So getting back to the game, I'm afraid I'm slightly lagging. So I've got some serious lag problems. I'm really sorry about this. So getting back to the game, I'm trying to flip the board, but I'm not getting responsiveness. So takes. Okay, just do this quicker. Just trying to load up the board. I've got sort of about 10 seconds lag for some reason, so a lot has happened, but we're going to analyze. So very nice idea from colwem. So you're picking up a piece for a pawn. Not only that, you're getting another pawn on g5, and this is going to initiate a huge attack. Takes, bishop here. So now you've got a choice. Is bishop takes h2 a threat, or can we be greedy and take another piece? So white plays very safely with bishop g3. Fair enough. Takes. Now it's interesting because in normal chess you'd almost always take with the h pawn to bring more and more pawns towards the center. The center is what it's all about. But because activity is so important in Crazyhouse, sometimes taking with the f pawn is a good idea, and I feel this may be one of those times because this move is saying this position is all about pressure on f6. Knight here is a huge mistake, because white can just simply take this knight and drop a knight in e7 and pick up the queen. But that's not what happened. I mean, so this is a free piece he could have just taken. Of course, black's move here should have been something like knight to g4, maybe with ideas here, and also just keeping an eye on h6 as well. No, not knight g4 doesn't work. Sorry, the queen's hitting g4. This is not so easy for black. Really not easy. But knight here, I mean, anything is better. Knight back, anything, and it's a huge problem because white is coming in on these dark squares just with the bishops and so on. But knight here, this exchange really benefits white. He's got a knight fork. Picking up the queen, and I mean, this is not only if you don't take that knight, some minors are landing on f6, and this is game over. Okay, but he goes instead for an attack on the queen, and and adande is really behind, so he's going for sharp positions. Something like here, takes queen, takes queen. Now this would have been a very good sharp position for colwem, because he could then have gone knight here check with his second knight, king goes into the corner, drop the queen here, rook takes, and knight takes pawn is smothered mate. So knight takes queen is, black actually can't take this white queen because of knight here check, king here, queen drop here, rook here, and knight takes pawn, smothered mate. So colwem's missed already mate in this game, or potential for, it's not a mate, because to be fair, this mate could be defended, but then you're just picking up. You've just won the queen, and you've got a huge attack going. But he missed the idea of a mate rather than a mate. So he takes back. He's still got a very dominant position, and it's all because of this pawn on g5, and he's got a hit on the queen. The queen moves. Another very nice move. Notice that bishops are both defenders and attackers. Really an interesting idea. And this is very difficult to defend. Knight at d7. Okay, so I'm not going to complain. He gets mate from this position anyway. And bishop takes g7 checkmate. So very powerful finish in the end from colwem. This bishop is just x-raying this pawn. Really, black's only move in this position is queen takes bishop and try to consolidate. But it's very hard because once white's got a queen in hand and two knights, you would only need one more knight. It would be incredibly difficult to defend because there are all these drops around the black king. But in the end, he doesn't need the queen. He has the mate with the two minors, the knight protecting the bishop. So it's the classic mate, knight, which in fact we saw in both games. The knight protecting the bishop, and the other knight cutting off the light square. So both defeated each other. Um, okay, so good games, and thanks everyone for watching. Oh no, I said I have a puzzle. I have a puzzle. So let's just open up the analysis board. Placing that pawn instead of respectively taking back. So let's open up analysis board. Yeah, so I did a training session with colwem last night, and he's saying placing the bishop to both defend and attack. We saw he did that in both games. The bishop to defend and attack. So bishops are very powerful pieces because they can both defend and attack at the same time. So bishop at g3 was first, and the second one, bishop here, with both defense and attack at the same time, was an idea we discussed in a little training session we had last night. So we had a puzzle which was how should how should black defend in this position? And Rusai says with the knight on f5, the game often wins itself. He says. Yeah, and you could say the same for the pawn on g5. So yeah. So because I'm streaming, my engine will be a little bit slow. So as I said, white clearly has an edge in this position, and Stockfish agrees. And I was thinking bishop at g6 might be the plan. Yeah, Stockfish very interesting. Just go straight for the attack at h3. No, then it changes its mind. It doesn't work. It's giving. So at h3, you just take it, and you're hoping to make something happen. So adande, yeah, he did a king run in the first game and got lucky. And sometimes it's all about whether they find the mate or not. Plus, I lost my connection. Okay, saying never resign because that stuff happens. So from 3 minutes down to 20 seconds. One inaccurate move and your king escapes. I was struggling to reconnect. I see. I didn't notice that adande was having connection problems. So at depth 20, it's finally said bishop at d7. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to stop. Takes and this ideas. And knight at f5 comes, so this would be line, and then at g6. So this is what the line which Stockfish recommends, and probably take this bishop and bishop takes maybe. Yeah, so this might be an example line, but then this pawn comes. Yeah, and the problem is black has castled into quite a nasty attack. If the knight moves, you're taking on g7. If the knight doesn't move, so probably best not to move in this position. So going back, so what about my initial idea, bishop at g6, and I suspect it's just bishop takes knight is the problem with this move. Indeed, bishop takes knight, queen takes. So if I just turn the engine off, I think we can see what the problem is. Pawn here. Do I back off or take it? I mean, either way, it's not that pleasant. Takes, winning a piece. I don't want to get my queen out where it can hit by tempi. So we arrive at a position like this. Black's got 4 pieces in hand. White's got 2. They both got 1 piece on the board. So effectively, white is somehow 2 pieces up, and that's surely going to hurt. And the question is, do we lay those pieces on? I mean, it's very tempting. You could even just move this knight to here, and not even use the piece. But probably it's better to put a new piece. They said knight d5, knight at d5, both very strong. And then the other move, which I hadn't seen, is bishop at d4. And I did say myself, so my feeling is knight at d5 is probably better, because you have so many pieces in hand. Although this knight will be wasted a little bit on c3, better to lay on new pieces. This knight then be better reinforced. And so bishop at d4 was the other idea. So we had I was just saying we had a positional puzzle, which I gave the viewers during the stream, which was I felt bishop at h6 was a big mistake. Of course, for all the reasons you showed, this g5 problem. But I was really scratching my head what to do in this position instead, and I was thinking maybe bishop at g6 just to reinforce the king side. But the problem, just to run through that line again, takes here, run back, takes, and white is 2 pieces up and can do something like this, and you can see white's got huge initiative, controls the center and everything. Another move apparently is bishop at d4. Again, just trying to eye these dark squares. It's very difficult to play for black. But the slightly better move apparently was this. A knight at f5 is strong, as happened in the game, targeting g7. Takes, and this sort of line. So if the knight ever moves, you're taking on g7. So probably never move that knight. So yeah, this is not a position in the game. This is a position. This is a variation of what should black have played. I feel this was a fairly critical position, although, yeah, Ryusai in the comments said actually castling was already the mistake. But this is a position where I feel like white is winning now, completely winning this position. Whereas before this move, I felt there might be some defense, and yeah, probably bishop at e7 reinforce was the best defense. But yeah, maybe castling was a mistake. But I'm not going to do a deep analysis. Yeah, okay. And since you missed it, I was saying actually in this position, you should have gone for just taking the queen. I mean, what you did was completely fine, because he can't take your queen. If he takes your queen, you've got a very pretty smothered mate. Oof, sorry, it's lag. So I'll just end by showing that on the screen. Knight here check, king here, queen here check, rook takes queen, and knight takes pawn, smothered mate. So the point is, when you take the queen, you're eyeing this f7 square. So that would have been an alternative way of finishing it. If he hadn't taken your queen, obviously you're also, if he takes this knight, for example, you take his knight and you're effectively a queen up. So that's also completely winning. Yeah, so good games, and hope you enjoy the stream.